You're very welcome to this special online broadcast to commemorate the Charlie Chaplin Comedy Film Festival. I'm Joe McGill, chairperson of the Waterville Enterprise Marketing Network, and you can check out visitwaterville.ie if you are visiting the area. And James Doyle, chairperson of the Charlie Chaplin Comedy Film Festival. James, this is exciting, but it's kind of sad in another way because I suppose, like every other festival, it has fallen to the current pandemic that's sweeping the globe right now.
And this would have been the 10th year of the Charlie Chaplin Comedy Film Festival, so it is sad, but we will be back next year, bigger and better.
Very good. So we're marking it. We're going to have a few Chaplin enthusiasts. So I interviewed a few over the past few weeks, and we're going to be playing them. You invited film submissions as well. You got a great reaction to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's now closed, so we're going to go through that now, and we'll announce the winners in the coming weeks.
That's brilliant. Really looking forward to that. Like you said, you're already looking forward to next year. The planning starts a year out as well.
It always does. So we're going to sit down soon and plan for next year and see how big and how good we can get it for next year.
Very good, because this area is a wonderful area to visit. The festival's been going so well over the last few years, and visitors love Chaplin and they love Waterville.
Absolutely, yeah. What's not to like, though, you've got the sea, the scenery, and then the comedy and the films. So it's a fantastic weekend all round.
Very good. If you are coming to the area, you should visit waterville.ie. That's visitwaterville.ie. There's tons of stuff to do here. Outdoor activities, including golf, including fishing, and water sports. So much more. Lots of visitor attractions, wonderful scenery, and of course, wonderful company. You can see why Charlie Chaplin chose it as a destination. So sit back, relax, and enjoy these interviews this evening that we carried out over the past few weeks with very special Chaplin enthusiasts, including Kate Guyon-Varsh, who is the director of the Chaplin office. And we also have Ayşe Behçet, who is a Chaplin enthusiast, but she's also bringing out a comic book about Charlie Chaplin. And she talks about the influence London had on Chaplin's works. And we also talk about his love affair with Waterville. So we hope you enjoy this from James and I. Enjoy. You're very welcome to this special broadcast as part of an even more special online Charlie Chaplin Comedy Film Festival event. I'm Joe McGill, and I'm coming to you from Waterville, where I'm delighted to say, joining us all the way from London, we have Ayşe Behçet, who is a history teacher, but she's also a Chaplin enthusiast, and she is producing a comic book about the life of Charlie Chaplin, which I'm very much looking forward to talking to her about. Ayşe, you're very welcome.
Hello, how you doing?
Not too bad at all. Come here. Let's go back to, I suppose, firstly, your love affair with Chaplin. Where did that come? How did that come about?
Well, when I was about 10, I think it was, the Robert Downey Jr. film came out, and I remember watching it with my grandmother. My grandmother was quite a placid person, and when I rewatched it and it got to the bit where he has the pint of beer thrown over him in the London pub, she got very animated. She was like, that wouldn't have happened. That just wouldn't have happened. Like, she was really animated about it. And I was like, why is she so animated about it? Why is she so adamant about it? And so I decided, because it was the summer holidays when I saw it, I decided I was going to go and go to the library, and I was going to try to find out what why she felt like there must be something written down. So the two books I got my hand on was David Robinson's Chaplin, His Life and Art, and obviously Chaplin's My Autobiography. And I still couldn't really understand as a 10-year-old after reading those books why she was so animated. And I got very interested in his films, and sort of the natural progression of watching that film did that anyway. But there was always this thought at the back of my head, like, why is she, like, it never ever went away. Years later, when she passed away, I said to my mum, oh, you know, I want to start looking into some family history. And she said, yeah, okay. I said, is this all right with you? Because obviously some people, when you look into the family history, they're a bit worried what's going to come out, you know. So she's like, yeah, I don't worry. It's no worry to me. So when I was on like Ancestry.com or something like that, I found that there was some photos and things of this particular relative that I'd found that lived in we've always lived in and around South London, but lived specifically in like around Kennington and Lambeth area. And when I started looking at it, I found out that this picture of Hanwell Boys' School is the same picture that's got Chaplin in. So my great uncle is in this same picture. Whoa. Now, we don't have anything massively connecting this boy to us apart from when I've traced the name and the name that we've been able to get this boy of it. Fair enough. He lives in my great aunt's house. All the addresses match to family relatives. Even my mum remembers as a child. So I knew obviously we're not related. That's not a big thing. But I started thinking: is his sense of humour geographical? Then is he? Is this a South London thing? And the more and more I was researching into him, the more and more I found. Do you know what? I think he actually is, and I think a lot of the things that came from his childhood was a result, I love from his films, was a result of his childhood and things growing up. So I started to blog about different parts of South London that still exist if you know where to look for them, that were inspirations for the films. Little things like a set of railings outside which was a building site in Kennington, which is now gone, not far from Christchurch. And obviously near the Imperial War Museum, that could have been the inspiration for city lights and all these sorts of things. And I started to do that, and that's how I went to the Slapstick Festival in Bristol, and I met David, and I asked him if he thought that Chaplin's humour was geographical, and he said, no one's ever asked me that before. So we became friends. I mean, I consider him to be like a mentor to me. I mean, I've passed him the artwork for this comic, and I've had, things like that. And it's just where it's gone. It's just, that's the start of the journey. And I called the blog on my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, all these things, Charlie's London. So when it came to me actually putting all this together, I thought, well, there's no better name to call it than Charlie's London, because I'm looking at how his humour and his place of birth has affected his art. So, and I realised that I wanted to put something out there that was slightly different, in the fact that there are two outstanding books and there's other books, and you can't deny that those two books, if you're going to start, they're the places to start. But I was thinking, what about new audiences? What about, young adults or teenagers that want to start getting into this? If I can use my comic to then branch them out to pick these two books up, I've done my job, is how I feel. Yeah. So that's pretty much what got me here. That's where I am. That's to the point I am now. Yeah,
it's amazing. David Robinson has been at the festival here in Waterford. We're delighted to host him here. An amazing man. The intellect of him, but also the knowledge of Chaplin is amazing. But just in relation to that, and you bring up an interesting point, and you often talk about this. Successful people, is it nature, is it nurture, and are they a product of their environment? And what have you found now along your journey? Is it very much down to where he's from? Has a huge influence on his work?
I think so. I do think so, and I think that as much as it was a really positive thing for him as well, I think it hindered him because I was talking to some American friends about this the other day, like the political spectrum in America to the political spectrum in the UK, and the fact that later on in his life he was accused of being a communist, and there was all the problems he went through with the McCarthy era. Yeah. I think that growing up in London, we have a very different idea of what socialism is and what, Labour is to America. There is much more black and white. And I think that growing up how he did, and in the 50s when he returned to London, I think at the Variety Club, he gave a presentation where he was saying how socialised medicine was such a great thing. And he was seeing all these houses go up, and it wasn't like when he was a child. I think he embraced that. And I think that as much as that was because his mindset was very much still with the place of his birth, other countries, especially his second home, didn't necessarily understand that this wasn't communism. This was just growing up in the streets of a very poor London family. And, essentially the same room that you slept in was where you bathed in, where you ate. Everything was like this. And I think that even though, of course, you had areas in America that were like that, I think the mindset was quite different politically. So when they saw him being this way, they just naturally assumed it was this, as they called it, this infection that was gripping America in the 40s and 50s, and it was communism. So I do think that there's a certain level of the Londoner that never left him. And I think, again, I think later on in life it caused him problems because he really, really wanted to be knighted. He wanted that from many, many years. And it was one of the reasons why he never gave up his British citizenship, because I think he still had this love for the place of his birth. And I don't think that was very understood. Like, you're living in America now, you've been here for 40 years. Why are you not becoming an American citizen? And he didn't understand the point of it. He was like, we speak the same language. I don't understand the reason. So I think there's an element definitely in that shows, and as my grandmother would have said, Londoners are very stubborn as well. And I think that he was definitely, there was lots of things about him that were quite stubborn.
Yeah. And just in relation to that, I suppose there's two questions in that. Do you think Charlie Chaplin was proud of where he came from? And do you think the people of London were proud of him as an export almost?
I think they were very proud of him. There was some slur that he refused to fight in the First World War, which was utter rubbish. In fact, funny enough, when it was the Chaplin Festival in Bologna in 2014, when it was the centenary of the tramp, I gave a presentation there on the false accusation of Chaplin's refusal to fight in the First World War. So I think that did cause him a problem, which is again where the story with me starts, because that's the first time I heard of it was that film. And my grandmother, growing up in South London, being proud to grow up in South London, she definitely didn't feel that way. And I don't think actually she even knew about this family connection. I think she'd probably heard rumours, but everybody in South London, everyone's got a story about their family being connected to him. And that's why I think it's another sign that they loved him. And as far as the place of his birth being something important to him, he came back many times. So I don't think that there's any doubt that there was always something. I think it humbled him and it scared him at the same time. I think that to come back to face these things reminded him of where he came from, and I think that was what that scared him at times when he was vulnerable. But at the same time, I think it also grounded him. It reminded him of the things he's achieved.
Yeah.
And interestingly, his return to London in 1952 is where my comic starts. So
yeah.
It's quite, I chose that point for many reasons, which we can go into.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about your comic. But just in relation to you have a massive social media presence now, and it just strikes me that Chaplin is universal. All ages enjoy him across all kind of social spectrums across the world. So what's it like, even on your Facebook page there, Charlie's London, what's it like to get that interaction from all over the world, from Chaplin enthusiasts and fans?
Oh, it's incredible, and it's people that you wouldn't even necessarily, know about. I've had, ex-colleagues that have reached out. I remember having an ex-colleague actually follow the page, didn't realise it was me, just followed the page because they loved Charlie Chaplin. When they found out it was me, it was like, Ayşe, is this yours? And I was like, yeah, it's been a passion of mine for the last 10 years now. So, yeah, I think it really, really is. And I've met so many interesting and diverse people along the route of the crowdfunding comics, artists that have worked for big companies that are going, I love Chaplin. I can't wait to get this. And it's just incredible, really. And I do think in a time when we live in so much uncertainty, his comedy and his humanity are two things that appeal to people. I can't tell you the amount of times when there's been some sort of political or social turmoil and the speech from the great dictator does its rounds on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And the thing that always makes me laugh is people don't realise it's Chaplin.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, that's Charlie Chaplin. What, the man dressed up as a tramp? Yes, the man that dresses up as the tramp. And I think that's just testament of him.
And I suppose the timelessness of that speech, like you say, like I remember, the last economic crash, that was played a lot and people were, got something out of it. Again, it's being played now a lot. I see it around and it's still relevant what he's saying. It's amazing the timelessness of his work.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's been used in many things as well. It's been used in so many different things. And I think that's a testament. And, recently, only last year, you had the Joker movie that had modern times in it. And there is a strong, the idea of the idea of modern times and the idea of what modern times, modern pressures does to people, which when you think about the story of that film of the Joker, the mental turmoil, there's a lot of people that I think are turning to a simpler time in some respects. I know that there's a lot of people that love silent films, love them because of the lack of special effects in regards to it's pure, it's honest acting, it's general acrobatics, it's actual stunts. People got hurt making these films. Whereas now there is this sort of pushback against the green screen era, if you like, someone just standing in front of the screen talking in front of a green screen talking to robots that aren't there. I think there's a big element of people picking up silent films again and they're seeing the golden age of Hollywood and how it's a lot more important than people realise.
And that social commentary aspect, that's something that's very much celebrated in the festival here in Waterville as well. It's not just the comedy element. There's so much to him, the music and everything else. It's all celebrated, which is great. Let's get on to the comic book. So tell us all about that. Who's involved and what should people expect?
Well, this is because it's a crowdfunding project. This is pretty much a one-man show in the fact that you hire artists and things, but the writing and essentially the marketing and all that sort of stuff, that's all me. It's going to be. It starts. I wanted to do something a bit different because I do know that there's already things that exist out there. So I wanted it to be about the social commentary and I wanted it to be thematic. So I wanted people to understand that this isn't necessarily going to be a once upon a time chronological take on his life. It's going to be something that you're going to put down and understand maybe why he made the decisions in his life he did, what things influenced him, even if he didn't necessarily realise. And so it starts in 1952 when he returns to London for the premiere of Limelight, and when he obviously receives the telegram that he has to go in front of the Court of Un-American Activities should he return to America, and he obviously chooses not to. And there's the way it starts is that he's had this his party in London for obviously him being there, the launch of the film, and he decides that all this weighing on his mind, he decides that one night he's just going to take a taxi and he's going to go to London. He's going to go a walk around Kennington, which we know that he did. It's well documented that he did those things. And then from that point, the comic's going to take you back to when he was born. So the idea is that every point that you hit along the route around Kennington and his childhood is a different point of the story. So because I really wanted to make it really different to what I'd seen before, and I wanted almost my audience to time travel with the comic, myself and the artist have developed the 1950s stuff is going to be in colour. The Victorian era is going to be in sepia tones, and the black and white era is going to be in black and white tones, black and white grayscale tones.
Yeah.
So when you go from these different points, you understand what exactly is going on. This comic finishes in 1921 with his return to London again after making the kid, because the theme running through this comic is at different points in his life he returns to London are big significant personal events in his life. Obviously, he returns in 1921, and then all the way through the 20s and 30s, you've got his own personal turmoils and his own scandals, but also some of the biggest films that he made were in the 20s and 30s. And then he returns in 31, and then that's in the middle of all of that. And I think there was a certain pull in him as well, that when the Second World War was going on, he wasn't here, even if it wasn't to live. I think he wanted to, part of his friendship with Winston Churchill was probably because he was wanting to contribute something to where he was born. So that's going to be how it's going to work. The plan is to do it over 1 to 3 comics, 1 to 3 graphic novels. So I launched the first one on the 16th of October, and if it's successful, the story will go into telling about the 30s and 20s and 30s. But the nice thing is, I've tried to do it in a way where, if it was a project that we decided we wasn't going to take any further and it was just going to be where it is, it's a nice story in itself to just have it finish in the 20s, and then we know what goes on with his story because he becomes the most famous man in the world, and the tramp is born. So that's where it's going.
And who is the artist involved?
There is an artist involved called Mickey Arts. He goes by the name of Mickey Arts on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. Absolutely exceptional. I've got a friend that lives in Bristol by the name of Carl Stefan, and he sort of is I know him from in and around Bristol, and he was going to do the work, and he's going to have a fantastic, really funny graphic novel called Mary Boys. And he's South African, and I was going to get him to draw it, and that's crowdfunded as well, and he was so in the midst of doing it. He said, Aisha, I don't have the time, but I know someone that will nail the style for you. So I was like, oh, brilliant, like if you can pass him over. And when I looked at the stuff, his artwork was incredible. So we've been backwards and forwards talking on Skype. He loves the idea. I've sent him over the script, and the actual what they call sequential art, so the pages that go inside, that's going to start. I think we start doing the initial layouts the first week in August, and when we launch on the 16th of October, which is customary when you launch a crowdfunding, you're meant to have 10 pages that the person that's investing can see. So the 10 pages will be up there, and because I like to make sure that everything is done the correct way with the Chaplin estate, I'll be sending those pages over to Kate and getting them to okay them before we move on and stuff like that. So it's very much going to be a project that's not only going to be as historically accurate as these things can possibly be, but it's definitely a passion project as well.
Yeah, it's a feast for the eyes, just looking at some of the images you have up there. It's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it must be a very exciting project for yourself. It's a real passion project, isn't it?
It is very much passion project. I mean, I'm using Chaplin's own words in his autobiography for the narrative, and also videos that I've been investigating through, like the Chaplin archives, and also the Pathé. I've got some great news reels of him returning to London in both the 50s and the 20s, which I've been using as well. And then I've been using David Robinson's book for pretty much, the atmospheric stuff. So to create the scene, to set the scene. And I think the other thing that's very special to me is the whole purpose of this is how it interlinks with sort of me. And I'm not in this book at all, but what I did discover was when was it? I think it was a couple of years ago. David said to me, "There's something I want you to have." And when I opened it up, it was his program from the premiere of Limelight. He gave it to me.
Whoa. And
when I looked on it, I was like, it's the 16th of October. And I was with my mum, and my mum looked at me and I looked at her. She went, "This is just too weird." And David went, "Why?" And I said, "My mum, that's my wedding anniversary." Jeez. So, yeah. So that was part of the reason why the premiere was in London on the 16th of October. The 16th of October is a Friday this year. It's a perfect date to launch the book. The book starts essentially with that return to London. So I thought, just launch it on that date. Everything else is, has got these themes and these things going with it. So that's another reason why it's coming together the way that it is.
Yeah, whoa. What do you think Charlie Chaplin would make of himself being in a comic book?
Well, they had the funnies in the time when he was alive. So I think if he had read it and he had seen the sympathetic note that I am taking with the fact of the trials and tribulations he went through, but also not shying away from the fact that he was very human. I think he would have appreciated it. And I think growing up in a family where he didn't read and write for such a while, because that was standard for children in poor families, didn't read and write, I think he'd appreciate that this is also something that's going to be able to help people that can't necessarily do the same. You know, like it's pictorial, it's visual. And because obviously the silent films rely so much on visuals, I think he would appreciate it was his life in the form of an art that he knew quite well. At least that's what I'd like to think.
Yeah. I'm just, going back to what you said at the start about the humour of the place. And I think Waterville and the area in London you're talking about are similar in that working class, a bit of crack, a bit of humour here as well. And I wonder, is that what he fell in love with when he came to Waterville as well, is that human interaction and a bit of fun?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because there's so many pictures that exist of him just walking around London when he used to come home. And I think that maybe you've hit on something there, because where in London he still got recognised even when he was in his 70s and 80s. If Waterville was very similar to that and he wasn't getting recognised, maybe that's why it was a natural transition to come there, because he was getting the best of both worlds.
I think the locals, the story goes, the locals expected to see the tramp coming into Waterville, and when they seen this elderly man in his 60s, they just left him alone. They weren't too bothered about him after that, so he really enjoyed the place, and they just liked him for who he was rather than Charlie Chaplin, the movie star.
I'll be honest, if I'd have seen him walking around London, if I was living in the 60s and I'd seen him, I probably would have left him alone, because I'd be too scared to approach him in case, he was quite disgruntled with somebody approaching him in his own private time, which is understandable. Or that he is an elderly gentleman just getting about his business and you just don't want to disturb or startle somebody, really.
Yeah.
So I think that, I can understand that.
Yeah. This is a difficult question now, but I'll throw it at you anyway. What's your favourite Chaplin work? I see you have the kid behind you, but that's an amazing piece. I think so emotional, that piece, and great comedy and all that. But what's your favourite Chaplin work?
I always gravitate to the circus if I want to put one on. It's very unsung. He doesn't even mention it in his own autobiography, because of so much personal tragedy going on at the time. And I think the film was plagued with issues. I think that the big top burnt down actually while he was making that film. So, and of course he was going through his divorce with Lita Gray, and I think his mother passed away at the same time. So I think that there was that's why he didn't include to speak. He didn't speak very much, because I think it maybe put him a bit too much pain to bring it up. But also I think that artistically, there's some amazing there's amazing bits in that. From a teaching point of view, The Great Dictator is always one. I mean, I do a thing at my school where when we're teaching the Second World War, specifically persecution under the Nazis to so year 7 and 8, so 13, 14-year-olds, I always do this one activity with them where I show them the Disney film, The Education of Death, which is bizarre in itself because it's beautiful Disney animation talking about a boy growing up in the Third Reich. And I show the speech of The Great Dictator, and I get them to analyse, as audiences seeing these in the 40s, how do you think they felt? So I think that different Chaplin films have different meaning to me. If you're talking about, as well, me growing up where I grow up and the stuff that I'm interested in, probably Easy Street. Because Easy Street is... Easy Street is very much, it's meant to be East Street, which obviously is East Street was where he was born. And the interesting thing is the actual set of Easy Street, doesn't look like East Street Market, which is obviously like the plaque is up there for the place of his birth, but it looks like a place called Lemon Court, which is actually around the corner, what was around the corner. And that's also around the corner from where my grandmother was born. So it's all very... these interlinked things. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably say the circus.
Very good. Before I ask you about the crowdfunded and the GoFundMe where you can go, we'll have to invite you to Waterville next year. You'll have to come over, and you'll have to make a Charlie's Waterville then, and move on from Charlie's London and do a Charlie's Waterville. So we'll be looking forward to that very much. But how can people know if they want more information on your project? Where should they go? And then where will it be available when it does come out?
Okay, so you can, the place that's the best place to find me is going to be on my Facebook page, Charlie's London. And the places that I have the most up-to-date information with the comic will be the Facebook page, and it will also be my Instagram, because I post the updates for that on there a lot more than I post anywhere else. And at the moment, the most regular update I put up last night was when you have a crowdfunding project, it's often customary if you have different tiers. So you'd have like one tier with like one of the covers, and then you could pick your variant cover of the comic and so on. And yesterday I've been working with a friend of mine who's been producing sketch cards. So they're like little trading cards, but they're hand drawn. And on one of the higher tiers, you'll be able to get one of these. And they're all hand little drawn caricatures of Chaplin. So they went up on my Instagram, and I was like, they're stunning. They're really innocent, and they're really bubbly and fun, which is exactly what I think that Charlie was, really, especially with the Tramp. And he actually did one yesterday, which I thought was amazing. I'm going to put it up separately today. He did one of an opening scene of Limelight, which has got Charlie's 3 children. So he's got a little caricature one of just the 3 of them looking up at him, and it's really cute. So I'll have to show you that.
Very good.
Yeah.
So it's Charlie's London is where they can find you on all social media. That's the best place to get you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Ayşe, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and we look forward to, you're in London, I'm in Waterville, we look forward to having you over here next year now when the festival is back up and running, as all these festivals hopefully will be next year. But it was great to get your insight as well, not just about the amazing graphic novel or the comic, but also your insight into Chaplin. And it's amazing to hear that connection with London as well. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for this broadcast. Stay here on the line, because we will have lots more coming up later on in the evening. Remember, you can visit waterville.ie to find out what's going on in Waterville, and also visit the Charlie Chaplin Comedy Film Festival page, Facebook page and website for more information.